The man sat up straight in his plush first-class seat, his heart pounding in his chest as he tried to piece together the events that led him here. He couldn't remember how he got on this train, let alone what he was doing in 1983. The sound of the tracks clattering beneath the train filled his ears, the vibration of the car sending shivers down his spine. He tried to focus, to make sense of it all, but his head was pounding, his thoughts were muddled. He checked his pockets, searching for any clues that would explain the strange predicament. His hand brushed against a ticket stub and a receipt, and as he pulled them out, a feeling of dread settled over him. The ticket was dated February 19th, 1983, and the receipt showed that the train had departed from Eleanor Station at 11:09 a.m. He looked at his wristwatch, the hands ticking away mercilessly. It was 8:39 p.m., and he was supposed to arrive at his stop in just over 2 hours. The man was surrounded by silence, save for the hiss of the ventilation system and the haunting drone of the train wheels. He was alone, and the realization was suffocating. He didn't know what was happening to him, but he knew that he needed to figure it out. He was trapped on this train, hurtling through time and space, with no idea where he was going or how he was going to get back. The suspense was unbearable, every moment stretching out into an eternity of uncertainty. Ralph stumbled to his feet, his head pounding and his vision blurred. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet, flipping it open with shaking hands. The first thing he saw was a photo of a woman with long black hair. He had no memory of her. But as he looked at her face, a feeling of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. Who was she? As he dug deeper into his wallet, he found his ID. Ralph Steinman, 37 years old. He couldn't remember a thing about himself. But as he held the card in his hand, his eyes were drawn to the gold band on his finger. Married. Was this mystery woman his wife? He had no memory of her, no recognition at all. Determined to find answers, Ralph opened the door to his sleeper room, stepped out into the quiet, eerie train car. The flickering lights overhead cast strange shadows, and the lack of other passengers only added to the eerie feeling that was building in Ralph's chest. As he walked down the aisle, he thought he saw someone move in the next car, a woman, quickly disappearing through the connecting door. But before he could call out to her, the lights suddenly went dark. Ralph stumbled forward in the blackness, his heart racing as a loud screech pierced the silence. He felt a hand grab his arm, yanking him, throwing him into a wall with a thud. The lights flickered back on, but when Ralph looked around for his attacker, there was no one in sight. Ralph's breathing was shallow and rapid as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Was he in danger? Was someone after him? He had no answers, only a growing sense of unease as he realized that he was trapped on this train, hurtling through the darkness with no idea what lay ahead. Ralph cautiously approaches the door, his senses heightened and alert. Who the hell? He mutters under his breath, his voice shaking with uncertainty. He takes a quick look over his shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something lurking in the shadows. But there's nothing there, only the eerie stillness of the empty train car. He steps closer to the door, straining to peer into the window of the next car. To his surprise, he sees a bustling scene inside. A full car filled with guests and crew members, all engaged in lively conversations and laughter. Ralph feels a brief moment of relief, but the hairs on the back of his neck are standing on end. He takes a deep breath and grabs the handle to make his way to the next car. The door creaks open. Ralph is greeted in a sight that sends shivers down his spine. An empty train, devoid of any signs of life. He stands frozen, staring in disbelief as he takes in the eerie silence that surrounds him. The lack of any noise, any movement, any presence is almost deafening. But as he listens more closely, he hears something. The distant sounds of a violin and cello playing a mournful tune. The music is haunting and fills the empty car with an atmosphere of sadness and foreboding. He can almost feel the notes weighing down on him like a heavy burden that he can't shake. Ralph's mind is racing as he tries to make sense of the empty car. Where did everyone go? What happened here? But he knows he can't just stand there. He has to keep exploring. He has to take a deep breath and steps forward, his eyes darting around the car, searching for any signs of what might have happened. The dim light from the overhead lamps cast eerie shadows on the empty seats and carpeted floor. Ralph's footsteps echo in the silent car, and he can feel the hairs on his back of his neck standing up again. He's never felt so alone and vulnerable in his life. He continues on, his heart racing and senses heightened, alert for any sign of danger. But as he moves deeper into the car, he realizes that the haunting music is growing louder and more insistent, like it's trying to warn him of something. Ralph doesn't know what he'll find at the end of this train car, but he can't turn back now. He has to keep moving forward into the unknown. Just as Ralph is about to lose himself in thought, the lights in the car suddenly go out, plunging him into darkness. The music he had been hearing changes, the mournful notes giving way to an upbeat and energetic rhythm. And then he sees it, flashing red lights, pulsing in time with the music, illuminating the car in a fiery glow. Suddenly, Ralph is surrounded by patrons and crew members, all of them dancing, laughing, and cheering. The smell of sweat and alcohol fills the air, and the sound of their voices and laughter is almost deafening. Ralph is momentarily stunned, but he quickly realizes that the atmosphere in the car has changed completely. "What the hell?" he exclaims, his voice barely audible over the noises. He looks around, trying to take in all the sights and sounds, trying to make sense of what's happening. But everything is happening so fast, and he can barely keep up.
Hey, man, what's up?
Someone shouts, slapping him on the back.
Join us for the party, it's just getting started.
Ralph shakes his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He takes a step back, trying to distance himself from the chaos that erupted around him. But the flashing lights, the pounding music are almost too much to bear, and he can feel himself getting pulled in despite himself. He tries to make his way to the door, but it feels like he's swimming against the current, fighting to escape the chaos that he's surrounded in. And as he looks around, he realizes that something is off. Something is different about his car and the people in it. But before he can put his finger on it, the door slides open and he tumbles out onto the empty train car beyond. The lights in the car flicker and dance, and then, without warning, Ralph sees people start to scream. The sounds of their voices, filled with fear and panic, pierces the air like a knife, and then a loud, ear-splitting, screeching noise fills the car, causing Ralph to cover his ears in pain. He looks around, trying to see what's happening, but everything is happening so fast. The train suddenly brakes, jolting Ralph forward and sending him sprawling onto the ground. He scrambles to his feet, trying to regain his balance, but the train is shaking and swaying. It's like it's about to come apart at the seams. The screeching noise grows louder, drowning out sounds of the screaming passengers. Ralph can feel his heart pounding in his chest, and his breaths are coming in short, shallow gasps. He's never been so scared in his life. He looks around, trying to find out a way to get out. But the car is filled with chaos. People are pushing and shoving, trying to get to the door, but it's jammed shut. Ralph feels the desperation rising within him, and he knows that he has to get out of here no matter what. With a final burst of strength, Ralph pushes his way through the throngs of panicked passengers. Making his way towards the door, he can hear sounds of metal twisting and tearing, like the train is being ripped apart piece by piece. And then, with a final sickening lurch, the train comes to a stop. Ralph stands there, gasping for breath, as the sounds of screams and sobs fill the air. Ralph takes a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He looks around, and to his surprise, he realizes that he is alone in the silent, empty train car. The panic and chaos that had filled the car moments before have vanished, leaving behind only a sense of eerie stillness. He rubs his eyes, wondering if what he's experiencing is just a nightmare. But as he opens them again, he knows that this is all too real. He makes his way back to his sleeper room, trying to put as much distance between himself and the chaos as possible. But as he settles into his berth, he hears a woman's voice calling his name. Her voice is soft and trembling, and she's crying. He looks around, trying to see where the voice is coming from, but he's alone in the room. He gets up, he walks to the door, trying to see if there's anyone outside. But when he opens the door, the voice seems to come from just beyond his reach. like it's taunting him. "Who are you?" Ralph calls out, his voice trembling. "Where are you?" The voice just keeps crying, calling his name over and over again. Ralph can feel a chill run down his back, and he knows that something isn't right. He takes a step back, trying to get away from the voice, but it seems to be getting louder, more insistent. "Please stop," Ralph pleads. "Just leave me alone." Ralph slowly steps out of his sleeper room, his heart pounding in his chest, as he can still hear the woman's voice crying and calling his name. He takes a deep breath and moves towards the source of the voice. As he approaches, he sees a woman standing 30 feet ahead. She is dressed in strange clothing, and the sight of her sends a shiver down Ralph's spine. The woman's clothes look like they belong to another time period, and the way she's crying, it's as if she's mourning the loss of someone close to her. "Who are you?" Ralph asks, his voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The woman just keeps crying, and Ralph can feel the fear and anxiety building inside of him. He takes a step back, but then he hears her say,
"Please help me. I've been lost here for so long. I need your help. Help me find a way back."
Ralph feels torn. He wants to help this woman, but something about her is making him feel uneasy. He takes another step back, ready to turn and run, when the woman suddenly stops crying and looks directly at him.
"Don't be afraid.
She says, her voice soft and calming.
I won't hurt you. I just need your help."
Ralph feels himself being drawn to the woman, and he knows that he needs to help her. He takes a step forward, ready to find out what she needs of him. When suddenly the train starts to shake, the lights flicker, and Ralph can hear the sounds of metal creaking and groaning. "What's happening?" Ralph cries out, looking around in fear. The woman just looks at him, her eyes sad and filled with sorrow.
"We're running out of time.
She says.
We need to hurry."
Ralph is frozen with fear as the woman's body suddenly twists and distorts, becoming something inhuman. He watches in horror as she begins to run towards him, her arms reaching out as far as if to grab him. Panic sets in, and Ralph turns to run, his feet pounding against the metal floor of the train. He knows he needs to find a place to hide, a place to keep himself safe from the terror that is pursuing him. He bursts into his sleeper room and slams the door shut behind him, panting and gasping for air. He leans against the door, his heart pounding in his chest. Ralph can feel the train shaking, and he knows that the creature that was once a woman is now right outside his door. He holds his breath, trying to stay silent. The giggling grows louder and more intense, and then suddenly, it stops. Ralph hears the creature sniffing at the door, and he knows that it's only a matter of time before it breaks through and finds him. He closes his eyes, praying for a miracle. Ralph crawls across the room, trying to keep himself hidden, and as he reaches the window, he sees that the train is racing towards a dark tunnel. He knows he must act fast. Ralph can feel the train accelerating even faster. He is disoriented, and all he can hear is the deafening roar of the tracks and the hissing of the ventilation system. The silence is unnerving, and Ralph knows that he must act quickly if he wants to survive. He frantically searches his room for anything that might help him, and he finally spots a luggage bag. He grabs it, yanks it open, and to his surprise he sees that it belongs to him. But as he reaches into the bag, he feels a chill run down his back. Despite the fear that is threatening to consume him, Ralph knows that he must keep moving. He can't stay in his room any longer. He decides to go to the connecting car behind him instead of the one in front of him like he did last time. He slides open the door, and as he steps into the next car, he is struck by the intense darkness. The darkness is all-consuming, and Ralph feels as if he's being swallowed by it. He moves forward, his hands outstretched, trying to feel his way. He can hear the sound of his breathing, and he knows that he must remain calm if he wants to make it through. Suddenly, he hears a sound. It's a soft shuffling, and it's coming from the end of the car. Ralph freezes, and he can feel his heart pounding in his chest. He doesn't know what he's up against, but he knows that he must be ready for anything. He takes a deep breath, and he begins to move forward. As he moves closer to the source of the sound, He can make out a shape of something moving. It's big, and it's getting closer. Ralph's heart is in his throat, and he knows he must act fast. He reaches into his bag, searching for a weapon. He finds a flashlight, and he clicks it on. And as the light illuminates the darkness, Ralph's heart is racing as he shines the flashlight on the source of the sound. As the light illuminates the end of the car, he sees that part of the aisle cart is stuck into the seat, and the motion of the train is causing it to make a loud banging noise. The cart is twisting and turning with each bump and jolt of the train, and Ralph can see that it won't be long before it comes loose and goes flying. Ralph's heart is pounding as he enters the connecting car. The emptiness of the previous car is unsettling, but the silence is even worse. Suddenly, he hears a man call out to him. The voice is weak and raspy, and it sends shivers down Ralph's spine. He cautiously moves forward, searching for the source of the voice. As he moves deeper into the car, he sees a figure seated at the far end. The man is leaning on a cane, his mouth open and twisted in a grotesque expression. His eyes are white and unseeing, and he seems to be looking straight through Ralph. Ralph takes a step back, feeling a sense of dread wash over him. He's never seen anything like this before, and he doesn't know what to make of it. But as he watches the man slowly turns his head towards him, and Ralph sees that his eyes are not just white, but completely devoid of any color of life. The man's mouth opens, and he starts to speak, but no sound comes out. Ralph can feel his knees starting to shake, and he takes another step back. He doesn't know what to do. He's never been in a situation like this before, and he doesn't know how to react. Suddenly, the man stands up. Ralph sees that he's not just leaning on the cane, but that he's actually using it to support himself. The man starts to move towards Ralph, his twisted mouth opening and closing as if he was trying to say something. Ralph can feel his heart pounding in his chest, and he knows that he needs to get out of there. He turns and sprints back towards the door, but as he reaches for the handle, he sees that it won't budge. He's trapped in the car with a twisted undead man, and there's no escape. Ralph's heart races as he hears the desperate pleas of the man. He turns towards the source of the voice, and what he sees sends shivers down his spine. The man's mouth was stretched, open, unnaturally twisted in a grotesque smile that revealed blackened and rotting teeth. His eyes were pure white with no sign of iris or pupil. They were fixed upon Ralph, pleading with him. The man's appearance was gaunt, with the skin stretched tightly over his bones and his clothes hanging off of him like rags. As Ralph approached the man here, he could see that the man was clutching a cane, his knuckles white from gripping so tightly. The man's voice was low and gravely filled with an otherworldly desperation.
Please don't leave me here, he begged. I need your help. I've been stuck on this train for what feels like an eternity. Please help me.
Ralph felt his heart pounding in his chest as he listened to the man's desperate pleas. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, and he felt like he was being pulled into a dark, sinister world. The man's groans grew louder, and he struggled to get to his feet, reaching out towards Ralph with a skeletal hand. Ralph took a step back, trying to distance himself from the man, but the man continued to inch closer, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he was being controlled by an unseen force. Ralph could smell the stench of decay coming from the man, and he knew that he could see this grotesque contortions of his face as he closed in on Ralph.
Please,
The man whispered, his voice echoing through the empty train car.
don't leave me here. I can't take it anymore. Help me.
Ralph felt a scream building in his throat as he backed away from the man, trying to escape the eerie and terrifying situation. But it seemed like there was no escape from the dark, haunted world that he had stumbled into. Ralph frantically twists and turns the handle. The door refuses to budge. He can feel the man's presence behind him, and he can smell the man's foul breath. Ralph turns around to face him. and he sees the man's eyes glowing with an eerie white, with a hint of madness. The man's mouth is open, and from it comes the endless stream of buzzing bees. Ralph watches in horror as a swarm fills the entire car, and the sound of their buzzing fills his ears like 100 angry drums. The smell of honey mixed with a scent of fear fills his nostrils. The stinging sensation begins as the bees cover his body, and he feels their sharp barbs penetrating his skin. Ralph tries to fight them off, but they are relentless as he realizes he may never escape this terror-filled train car. The sound of their wings beating is deafening, drowning out the man's groans. The air is thick with pungent and coppery odor of blood. Ralph feels dizzy and disoriented as he tries to make his way to the door, but it still won't budge. The man's voice echoes in his mind.
The pain.
Ralph can sense that the man is getting closer, but he can't see him. The only thing he can see is the swarm of bees blocking his vision. He tries to shield himself from the stings. His arms, it's no use. The man's laughter grows louder, almost like a chorus of madness. Ralph is trapped in the car, surrounded by a cloud of bees and the agony of the unknown. Ralph hesitantly stands up and approaches the door to the next car. As he opens the door, the sound of clinking glasses and laughter fills the air. The smell of juicy steak wafts towards him, making his mouth water. He steps into the car, and it's a stark contrast to the eerie emptiness of the previous one. The walls are covered in elegant wallpaper. The chandeliers are glittering. Patrons are dressed in fancy attire and seated at tables, chatting and laughing over their meals. Ralph rubs his eyes, trying to make sense of what he's seeing. Was he just in a nightmare? He cautiously makes his way towards the back of the car, listening to the sounds of silverware clinking against the plates and the murmur of conversations. Ralph approached the table, where a woman sat alone, her eyes downcast, and a plate of fish in front of her. As he approached her, he noticed that she was the only person on the train who wasn't showing any signs of joy or excitement. Instead, she seemed sad, almost haunted. The strong smell of the fish mixed in with the aura of sorrow, creating a tense atmosphere. As he sat down across from her, Ralph cautiously asked, "Excuse me, ma'am, are you all right?" The woman looked up at him with pain filled in her eyes and shook her head.
I don't know. I don't remember where I'm going or where I came from. All I know is that my head hurts terribly.
Her voice was weak and strained, and Ralph couldn't help but feel a sense of pity for her. He noticed that her skin was pale and her eyes were bloodshot, with dark circles beneath them. Her hair was tangled and greasy, and her clothing was disheveled. The once delicious-smelling fish on her plate now seemed unappetizing, and the scent of it only added to the discomfort of the situation. Ralph tried to make small talk to distract her from her pain, but she only answered in monosyllables, her eyes never leaving her plate. The atmosphere in the car was thick with tension, and the only sound was the occasional clinking of silverware on the plate. As he sat there trying to think of what he could do to help this woman, Ralph couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The chatter and laughter of the other passengers in the next car only served to highlight the eerie silence at the table. He mentions that he too is experiencing a similar situation, unable to remember who he is, but his ID says his name is Ralph. Encouraging her to search for clues, Ralph suggests that she check her clothes and purse. The woman obliges and rummages through her purse, finally pulling out a wallet with her ID. Her name is Martha Thompson. She is 41 years old. She is dressed in denim pants and a large sweater, which makes her look comfortable and casual. Her hair appears somewhat unkempt, giving her somewhat of a disheveled appearance. Her hands shake as she holds her identification, which only adds to the tension of the moment. Her braces, which are visible as she speaks, highlighting her nervousness. Despite her anxiety, she maintains a determined look on her face as she tries to piece together what was happening around her. Her attire is practical and functional, suggesting that she may have a down-to-earth personality. As she holds her ID, Ralph can see the fear in her eyes. He begins to tell her about the man with bees and the woman who chased him earlier, and the constant strange experiences they both have been facing. Martha listens intently as Ralph describes the intense and bizarre events. her eyes fixed on him as he tries to process the information. Martha, have you been experiencing any strange occurrences on this train? Ralph asked, his voice serious and filled with concern. Martha's hand shook as she clutched her wallet tightly.
Yes,
She whispered, her voice trembling.
but I can't remember where I'm going or where I came from. It's just my head. My head, it hurts so badly.
Ralph nodded sympathetically. I know what you mean. I can't remember anything either. All I have is this ID. It just says my name is Ralph. He paused, his eyes scanning the carriage before continuing. And there may have been some strange events happening on this train, Martha. I was chased by a woman, and just a few minutes ago I was in the connecting car back there, and a man with glowing eyes released a swarm of bees from his mouth. Barely made it out alive. Martha's eyes widened with shock.
That's terrible, Ralph. I just don't understand what's happening to us. We need to find a way out of here.
I agree, Ralph said, determination evident in his voice. But first, let's try to piece together any information we can about ourselves. Our IDs are a start, but I think we need to know more about who we are and why we're here on this train, Ralph says. I couldn't help but notice that everyone else seems to be happy. It's a bit, eerie, don't you think? Martha looks up at Ralph, her eyes squinting in the dim light.
I know what you mean,
She says.
It's like we're the only ones here who realize something's off.
She gestures around the car, the walls seeming to close in on them.
The laughter, the chatter, it all just seems so forced.
Ralph nods in agreement, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of what's wrong. The sound of glasses clinking and the music playing fills the air, but it's almost too cheerful. The train car was dark and somber with curtains drawn over the windows to block out the view. I feel like I'm losing my mind, Ralph confesses. Martha nods sympathetically.
Me too.
She says,
I think we should explore this train together. Keep each other company. It might help us keep our sanity in check.
Ralph nods in agreement. Grateful for the company, they make their way down the aisle, their footsteps echoing on the floor, the darkness closing in on them as they go.
Excuse me, sir. And, madam,
The crew member said with a forced smile.
may I interest you in our world-famous chicken and special honey dipping sauce? It's a must-try on this train.
Ralph frowned, suddenly recognizing the irony of the bees from earlier. He felt a twinge of unease in his stomach as the memories flooded back to him. No thank you, I think we'll pass, he replied politely. The crew member's smile faded, replaced by a look of anger.
I beg your pardon.
He snapped.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Why would you refuse such a treat?
Martha stepped forward, sensing the tension between the two men.
We appreciate the offer, but, well, we're not really in the mood for food right now.
She said softly. The crew member's eyes narrowed.
Not in the mood? Do you have any kind of idea of what kind of effort goes into preparing this type of food?
Ralph and Martha exchanged a worried look as a crew member loomed over them, his voice rising.
I won't stand for this kind of disrespect.
He said through gritted teeth.
You two better reconsider.
Ralph's heart began to race as he took a step back, hands raised in a pacifying gesture.
Look, we're sorry,
He said.
We don't want to cause any trouble.
The crew member scowled.
Too late for that.
He growled.
You'll regret your decision. Mark my words.
And with that, he spun on his heel and strode off, leaving Ralph and Martha alone once again.
That was close.
Martha breathed, her voice trembling.
We need to stick together, Ralph. Who knows what else is out there?
Martha's eyes widen in shock as she watches the guests devour the fried chicken with a ravenous hunger. Their movements are wild and uncontrolled, as if possessed by some unforeseen force. The chicken and honey sauce drips down their chins, mixing with saliva and other remnants of previous bites, creating a sickening display of gluttony.
Ralph, look!
Martha cries out, pointing at the guests. Ralph's eyes follow her gaze, and he too is horrified by what he sees. The guests seem to be in a trance, completely unaware of their surroundings, and consumed only by their desire for the chicken and honey. Martha's voice trembles as she says,
What's happening to them?
Ralph is just as shocked and frightened as she is. He can only feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as he watches the guests continue their frenzied feast. Suddenly, one of the guests looks up, and their eyes lock with Ralph's. The guests' eyes are wild and crazed, and there is a madness in them that sends a chill down Ralph's spine. Martha screams again and pulls Ralph back away from the guests.
We need to get out of here.
She says, her voice shaking. Ralph agrees, and they quickly make their way towards the door, trying to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the guest. As they move, they can hear the sickening sound of flesh being torn and bones being crushed, and the pungent smell of honey and fried chicken fills their nostrils. As Ralph and Martha run towards the connecting car, Ralph pulls Martha's hand. We have to hurry, Ralph says, panting. Martha nods, her eyes wide with fear. They both break into a sprint, their feet pounding against the metal floor as they make their way to the car that contains Ralph's sleeper room. They can hear the sound of a woman's laughter echoing through the train. Ralph's heart is pounding in his chest as he realizes that they're only a few feet away from the mystery woman. He turns to Martha, who looks just as frightened as he does. The sound of a woman's laughter seems to get louder and more frenzied as they get closer. Ralph and Martha cautiously approach the sleeper car door, their hearts pounding in their chest. The air is thick with tension and uncertainty as they try to make their way to safety. Ralph's mind races with thoughts of the mysterious crying woman and the man with the bees, and he can sense Martha's fear and anxiety as she walks beside him. Every step feels like a small victory, but they know that danger could just be around the corner. They grip each other's hands tightly, their eyes locked on the door as they inch closer. The sound of their own breathing is the only thing that they can hear, and the tension continues to build with each passing moment. Just as they are about to reach the door, they hear a sudden shuffling noise behind them. They turn around and see the woman standing there, her eyes fixed on them, a wicked smile spreading across her face. Ralph and Martha's hearts skip a beat as they quickly lunge to the door, their hands fumbling with the handle. Go, go, go! Ralph shouts. As he pulls open the sleeper car door, he and Martha dash inside, slamming the door behind them. They lean against the door, gasping for breath as the sound of a woman's laughter fades away.
What the hell was that?
Martha says, her voice shaking. I don't know, Ralph says, his heart still pounding. We have to keep moving. We have to find a way out of this nightmare. Ralph nervously checks his wristwatch, his heart racing with anxiety as he tries to make sense of what is happening. He sees that the time is stuck at 8:39 p.m. and realizes that the seconds hand is still moving, but the time isn't. Confusion and fear begins to set in as he tries to shake the watch, tap the face, but the time remains frozen at 8:39 p.m. He holds the watch up to his ear, listening for any sign of a ticking sound, but all he can hear is the muffled sound of the train's wheels clacking against the tracks and the hiss of the ventilation system. Ralph starts to feel disoriented. The overwhelming feeling of uncertainty and fear is making his head spin. He wonders if he has fallen into some sort of strange alternate reality where time has lost its meaning. He takes a deep breath to calm himself, but the situation only grows more surreal and eerie. With each passing moment, Ralph feels as if the weight of the unknown is bearing down on him, making it difficult to think clearly. He clutches the wristwatch tighter in his hand, desperately trying to hold on to a sense of reality. Martha reaches for Ralph's hand, pulling Ralph out of his daze. Martha's grip on Ralph's hand tightens as he explains the surreal experience he's just had.
Are you sure you're okay, Ralph?
She asks with a worried tone, her eyes darting around the empty train car. Ralph nods. Yeah, I think so. I just don't understand what's going on. When I first woke up here, I was walking down the aisle, and next I was in complete darkness with a screeching noise piercing the silence. It just doesn't make any sense. Martha listens intently, a frown forming on her face.
And maybe you saw an empty train car and heard music playing?
She asks, her voice low and serious. Ralph nods, still feeling a chill run down his spine at the memory. Yeah, it's kind of a mix of a violin and cello. The notes sounded really heavy and sad. Martha pauses, deep in thought.
Okay, let's try and piece this thing together. You have no memory of how you got here. The time on your watch is stuck at 8:39, and now we're experiencing strain events on the train.
She summarizes, her brow furrowed. Ralph nods, grateful for Martha's level-headedness. Yeah, that's about the gist of it. I just want to figure out what's going on and why I'm here. Martha nods and gives his hand, gesturing a squeeze.
We'll figure it out together.
She says, with determination.
Let's keep exploring and see if we can find any more clues.
Martha hesitantly suggests.
You know, maybe we should try and speak to her. Find out what she knows. Maybe she can help us understand what's going on.
Ralph looks at Martha with a skeptical expression. Are you sure that's a good idea? She just scared the hell out of us. What if she's dangerous? Martha nods, determination in her eyes.
I know it's a risk, but I don't think we have much of a choice. We need answers, and she might be the only one who has them.
Ralph hesitates for a moment, then nods in agreement. Okay, let's do it, but we need to be careful. Together, Ralph and Martha cautiously make their way back to the door, ready to face the mysterious woman and uncover the truth about the ghost train. Ralph and Martha cautiously open the door and peer out into the dark, empty corridor. They call out to the woman, but there's no response. The lights flicker on and off, casting eerie shadows across the walls. They hold on to each other tightly, their hearts racing with fear. Suddenly, the train begins to speed up. It wheels screeching against the tracks. Ralph and Martha struggle to keep their balance, their eyes searching the darkness for any sign of the woman. Just as they think that they are about to lose control, the lights come back on, illuminating the woman, who is standing a few feet away from them, tears streaming down her face. Ralph and Martha exchange a worried look, then slowly approach the woman.
Are you okay?
Martha asks softly. The woman looks up at them, her eyes red and puffy.
I'm so sorry,
She says, her voice trembling.
I didn't mean to scare you. I just need to get your attention.
Ralph and Martha exchange a confused look. What do you mean? Ralph asks. The woman takes a deep breath and begins to explain.
I've been on this train for what feels like forever.
I've tried to escape, but I can't.
And I'm not the only one. There are others trapped here just like me. And I think you're here for a reason too.
Just as the woman continues to speak, Ralph and Martha begin to realize that they have stumbled into something far more sinister than they ever could have imagined. They must work together to uncover the truth about the ghost train and find a way to escape before it's too late. Her eyes filled with sadness and regret.
There was a bad man,
She says, her voice trembling.
I saw him trying to take you. I didn't know what else to do, so I tried to stop him. And I accidentally threw you into the wall. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you.
Ralph's mind races as he tries to make sense of what she's saying. Slowly, he begins to remember the bits and pieces of the incident, the feeling of being pulled away, the sudden impact of hitting the wall. That was you? He asks, his voice filled with shock and disbelief. The woman nods, tears streaming down her face.
I'm so sorry.
She says,
I was just trying to help you. Now we're both stuck on this train.
Ralph looks at her. his expression serious. "What do you mean, trapped? What's going on here?" The woman takes a deep breath, her eyes filled with fear.
I don't know exactly.
She says,
All I know is that there are others here, just like us, who have been taken and can't escape. I think we're in grave danger, and we need to find a way out together.
Ralph nods, determination in his eyes. "Okay," he says. "Let's do this. Let's find a way out of here, get to the bottom of what's going on." The woman continues, her voice filled with pain.
Every time the train speeds up or brakes, I feel this intense pain, like my body is being torn apart. And when it does, I see visions of things, terrible things. It's like I'm being shown a glimpse of another world, a world of darkness and suffering.
Ralph and Martha exchange a worried look. "What do you think this means?" Ralph asks. The woman shakes her head.
I don't know.
She says,
But I do know that this train, it's not like any other train I've seen before. It's just a physical space. Like it's a manifestation or something else. Something darker, more sinister.
Martha's eyes widen in fear.
Do you think we're dead?
She asks, her voice trembling. The woman shrugs.
I don't know.
She says,
But I do know that we're not alone on this train. That we need to be careful. There are others here like us who have been taken and they're not all friendly. We need to find a way out fast.
Ralph pauses, then turns to the woman. "Wait a minute," he asks. "I remember seeing you earlier. You were running towards me and I saw you twist into form. What happened to you?" The woman's eyes widen and she nods.
Yeah, that was me. I was trying to protect you from the bad man, but then I was hit by the pain and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I couldn't control my body. It just twisted and bent.
Martha shudders.
What's causing that to happen?
She asks. The woman shakes her head.
I don't know, but I think it's connected to this train, to the darkness that's trapped us here. It's like the train is feeding on our fear, our pain, using it to sustain itself.
Ralph nods, a look of determination in his eyes. "We need to find a way to stop this," he says. "We can't just sit here and wait for it to end. We need to take action." The woman nods, her eyes filled with hope.
I agree.
She says,
Let's find a way to escape this train and stop whatever's causing all this.
Suddenly, the woman let out a blood-curdling scream. The lights went black, and in an instant she seemed to have disappeared into thin air. The train lurched violently, and Martha and Ralph were thrown backwards into their seats. The sound of metal screeching against metal filled the air. The entire train shook as if it was about to come apart at the seams. There was a loud boom, followed by a series of smaller explosions, and the sound of glass shattering filled the air. The red emergency lights flickered on and off, casting an eerie glow over the wreckage. The smell of smoke filled the air, and the sound alarms blared. Adding to the chaos, the floor lurched again, throwing Ralph and Martha to the ground.
What's happening?
Martha screamed. "I don't know," Ralph replied, grabbing her hand and pulling it up. As they stumbled through the darkness, the sounds of the train tearing apart and the scratch of metal echoed in their ears. It felt like they were in a nightmare, unable to escape the terror that had trapped them in this train. With each step, they could feel the floor shifting beneath them, and the sound of the train colliding with something grew louder. They stumbled forward, their hands clutching at anything to keep their balance, until finally they reached the door. With a final burst of strength, they threw open the door and stumbled out. Ralph turned to Martha, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice shaking. Martha nodded, her face pale in the flickering red light.
I think so.
She said, her voice weak. The smell of burning metal and smoke filled the air, and they could hear the sound of fire crackling in the distance. As they moved, they were able to take in the full extent of the destruction. Ralph put an arm around Martha, helping her, keeping her balance as they made their way across.
What happened?
Martha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Ralph replied, his mind racing. As they walked, the haunting sound of a sad violin and cello filled the air. The mournful music seemed to follow them, echoing through the darkness, and adding to the feeling of unease that hung over them. The notes of the violin and cello seemed to swirl around them, matching the rhythm of their footsteps as they stumbled. The music was both beautiful and haunting, reflecting the tragedy and terror that they had just experienced. Ralph and Martha looked at each other, their eyes wide with fear, leaving only the sound of their footsteps. Suddenly, the lights went out again, and the music stopped, leaving Ralph and Martha in complete darkness. The train suddenly jolted and then smoothly picked up speed as if nothing happened. Ralph and Martha stumbled around trying to make sense of what's happening. They were confused and disoriented, and they had no idea how the train had suddenly been repaired and was moving forward as if nothing happened. As they made their way back to Ralph's sleeper room, they were filled with a sense of unease. Had they truly experienced all that they had on this train, or was it all just a twisted nightmare? When they finally made it back to Ralph's sleeper room, they found out everything was exactly as it had been before. The familiar furnishings, the cozy bed, and the sense of safety that they had felt earlier had all returned. But despite the normalcy of their surroundings, Ralph and Martha could not shake the feeling that something was not right. They knew that they needed to find answers, but for now, all they could do was try to rest and gather their thoughts. Ralph and Martha stepped out of the sleeper room determined to find answers, and the woman they had encountered earlier. They knew that the journey would not be easy, but they were both committed to uncovering the truth about the train. As they walked through the darkened corridors, they noticed that the atmosphere on the train was different. The air was heavy and thick, with a sense of foreboding, and they could hear strange whispers echoing through the train. Despite their fear, Ralph and Martha pressed on, searching the train for any sign of a woman. They looked in every compartment and sleeper room, but there was no trace of her. Just as they were about to give up, they stumbled upon a mysterious door that they had not seen before. They cautiously approached it, slowly pushed it open, only to find themselves standing at the edge of the platform, overlooking an infinite void. The woman was standing in front of them, her eyes fixed on them. This time she was no longer crying, but instead her expression was one of determination.
You need to leave this train.
She warned.
There's a darkness here that you cannot imagine. You must go before it's too late.
Ralph and Martha were filled with a sense of dread as they realized that the train was far more dangerous and sinister than they had ever imagined. But they were also more determined than ever to find the answers that they were seeking. The woman nodded at Ralph's mention of the old man with the twisted mouth.
Yes, I remember him. He's one of the conductor's minions. He's just as cruel, sadistic as the conductor himself. He loves nothing more than to torment and scare us.
Why does he have bees coming out of his mouth?
Martha asked, her eyes wide with horror. The woman shuddered.
I don't know, but it's one of the conductor's many twisted experiments. He enjoys playing with our fears, and the old man with bees was just one of his many creations.
Ralph and Martha felt a sense of fear and unease settle in the pit of their stomachs. They knew that they were dealing with something truly sinister, and they didn't know how they were going to defeat it. We have to find a way to escape this train and stop that conductor, Ralph said determinedly.
Agreed.
Martha replied, her voice firm.
Can't let them continue to torment us and terrorize us, and along with the other passengers, we have to find a way to put an end to this once and for all.
She explains that the old man and all the other passengers are trapped on this train and are under the control of the conductor. The conductor is causing them pain and torment, and that is why the man has a twisted mouth and the bees appear around him. The woman reveals that she has been trying to help other passengers escape, but so far has been unsuccessful. She warns Ralph and Martha that the conductor is a powerful and a malevolent spirit, and defeating him will not be easy. They must be careful as the conductor is always watching, and he will do everything in his power to stop them from freeing the passengers and ending his reign of terror on this train. As they try to help the woman, she suddenly begins to scream in terror. Her body starts to levitate off the ground and her face contorts in horror. Her arms twist and bend in unnatural ways and her legs follow suit. Ralph and Martha, terrified by what they're seeing, quickly back away from her. The woman cries out for them to leave her, but they are rooted to the spot, horrified by what they are witnessing. Suddenly, the train starts to shake and the lights flicker, adding to the chaos. Ralph and Martha finally snap out of their shock and turn to run away. They don't know where to go or what to do. They are trapped on this train with no way out, and they don't know what's going to happen to the woman or what will happen to them. Ralph and Martha turn around to see the woman lying on the floor, motionless. Her eyes are closed and her arms are twisted in unnatural angles. The once beautiful smile on her face has been replaced with a grotesque expression of pain and terror. Ralph feels a chill run down his spine as he realizes the woman is dead. He and Martha exchange a horrified look, both too stunned to speak. They hear a sound that resembles a man laughing coming from down the corridor, followed by the shuffling of footsteps. Ralph and Martha know they have to leave, fast. They run towards the exit, their hearts pounding, not daring to look back. As they turn the corner, they come face to face with the old man with the twisted mouth and the bees. His eyes are wild, his laughter maniacal. As he raises his hand towards them, the bees swirling around him. Ralph and Martha are paralyzed with fear, but they know that they must keep moving if they want to survive. They make a run for it, dodging past the old man and his bees, their feet pounding on the floor as they try to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the old madman. "Let's make our way to the front of the train. Maybe we can stop it." Martha nods.
Yeah, let's go. I don't want to stay here any longer.
They make their way towards the front of the train, holding each other's hands tightly as they walk. They hear strange noises all around them, whispers, laughters, and other sounds they can't identify. The train feels like it's shaking more and more with each step they take. Finally, they reach the engine room. The door is locked, but Ralph kicks it open and they both run inside. The room is dark and silent, except for the sound of the train's engine. Ralph starts to look for the brakes, but he can't find them. Just then, they hear a sound of footsteps behind them. Suddenly, Ralph falls to the floor. When Ralph comes to, he finds himself tied to a chair. The conductor is standing in front of him, a sinister grin on his face. The conductor explains to Ralph that the woman and the old man were just two of many passengers who were lured onto the train by a promise of wealth and success, only to be trapped here forever under his control. The conductor reveals that he is behind the ghostly apparitions, and that he has been using the passengers' fears to keep them under his power. Ralph struggles against his restraints, trying to break free, but the conductor just laughs, telling him that he will never leave this train. Ralph realizes with a growing sense of dread that he is trapped here forever, a prisoner of the ghost train. As the conductor cackles, Ralph closes his eyes, steeling himself for whatever horrors may come. As Ralph regains consciousness, he blinks his eyes and struggles to sit up. He looks around, trying to get his bearings, when he suddenly notices the conductor standing before him. But something is different. The conductor's appearance has changed. He is no longer the twisted, gnarled figure he had seen before. Instead, his features have smoothed out. He now appears to be a normal person. Ralph is taken aback by this sudden change, but he can't shake the feeling that something is off. He watches warily as the conductor approaches him, a smile on his face.
"How are you feeling, sir?"
the conductor says, his voice smooth and calm. Ralph nods, still in shock from the transformation he just witnessed. He stammers, trying to form a coherent sentence. "What happened to you?" The conductor laughs.
"Oh, don't worry about that. You just had a bit of a fall. I took care of it."
Ralph's mind races, trying to make sense of what's going on. He realizes that he needs to get off of this train as soon as possible. With a burst of determination, he stands up and makes a break for the door. The conductor's smile disappears as he realizes Ralph's intentions.
"I'm afraid I can't let you do that, sir,"
he says, blocking Ralph's path. Ralph's heart races as he realizes the true nature of the conductor's control over the train and his passengers. He must find a way to escape before it's too late. The conductor sits across from Ralph, his eyes fixed on him with a menacing gleam.
"You should have eaten the honey, my boy. It would have made your journey much more pleasant. Instead, you've chosen to resist, and now you will suffer the consequences."
The conductor's voice is calm and collected, but there is an undercurrent of anger and threat in it. Ralph shudders, Feeling a chill run down his spine, the conductor's twisted smile seems to widen as he leans in closer to Ralph, who feels trapped and helpless. The conductor informs Ralph that the honey has been laced with a potent substance called X9, which is a hallucinogenic solution that induces a state of euphoria and happiness. By accessing, the conductor addressed Ralph with a grave tone.
The guests at the party were all under the influence of X9 solution. It was the main ingredient in the honey that was offered to you. That explains your vivid encounter with them on the train, as you still had traces of the drug in your system when you arrived.
The conductor continued.
I tried to administer more X9 to you when you first woke up, but the woman intervened, throwing you into the wall when I tried to administer it. I must emphasize that the dangers of this substance, it taps into the subconscious and offers a tantalizing taste of an alternate reality. But the consequences can be severe.
The conductor imparted to Ralph, with a somber voice.
The bees you encountered were carriers of the X9 variant, and they administered a microdose to you just before your encounter with Martha. The entire experience you had was a hallucination.
The conductor leaned in, emphasizing his words.
The old man did not, in fact, have bees, but instead was holding a syringe with a microdose. The X9 variant is extremely powerful and can manipulate one's perceptions, but the consequences of its use can be severe.
The conductor spoke to Ralph in a serious and deep tone.
Ralph, I must inform you that the bees were a creation of your subconscious mind, and I'm afraid that the same can be said for Martha. She was never a real person, but rather a coping mechanism that your subconscious devised to deal with the effects of the X9 variant.
The conductor paused for a moment before continuing.
Martha was a manifestation of your daughter, Margaret, an image that your mind conjured to bring comfort to the face of the drug's influence.
The conductor spoke to Ralph in a chilling, serious voice.
Ralph, the crying woman you encountered was another victim of the X9 variant. She stayed outside of the designated safe area and stumbled upon the production floor.
The conductor's voice became hushed and ominous.
She walked into a serpentine belt and was subjected to a horrific mutilation. You were a witness to her death, which is why you have been haunted by her distorted image.
The conductor continued.
I must also inform you that the employee tasked with monitoring the subject was dismissed for failing to prevent this tragedy. They found you talking to the woman's lifeless body, further highlighting the dangerous and unpredictable nature of the X9 variant.
The conductor's voice became low and grave.
Beware, Ralph. The consequences of indulging in this substance can be devastating. Ralph, you were offered the X9 solution by the waiter, and you declined, leading to your experience of the dark side of the train. This is a common side effect of the solution leaving your body.
The conductor's voice became low and measured.
You are one of many subjects involved in an experiment of the X9 variant. You volunteered for this experiment when you learned of the possibility of living in alternate reality. But now you must understand the dangers of this substance. It can manipulate your perceptions, leading to unpredictable and potentially dangerous consequences.
The conductor's voice became hushed and ominous.
Beware, Ralph. The reality you thought you were seeking may have been nothing more than an illusion. Ralph, I'm afraid your motivation for participating in this experiment was to reunite with your wife and daughter. They recently passed away.
The conductor observed the shock and confusion on Ralph's face before continuing.
You, unfortunately, waived all rights to refuse treatment when you agreed to participate. And now, in order to see your family again, you must accept a higher dosage of X9.
Ralph was horrified by the news, and the conductor explained.
You will likely experience shock as a side effect of the increased dose, which is why it's critical that you will be injected with this X9 immediately to combat the symptoms. I understand your hesitation, Ralph, but I can assure you this is the only way you will be able to reunite with your loved ones.
Ralph reluctantly agreed, feeling the warm solution enter his arm. But what he didn't know was the full extent of the dangers he was exposing himself to. The conductor's voice became hushed and ominous.
Beware, Ralph. The consequences of seeking alternate reality through the X9 variant may be more than you bargained for.
The music filled the air. The sound of violin and cello created an upbeat rhythm. Ralph was momentarily disoriented by the lights as they flickered on and off and on. But then he heard a voice calling out,
Daddy!
He turned to see his daughter hugging him tightly. A woman sat across from him, and it was the same woman from the photograph. Hey, I remember you. Claire. The woman looked up at him and said,
Hey, honey. I think you had too much to drink. We have 2 hours until we arrive.
Ralph looked at his watch and saw that it read 8:45. Then, suddenly, realized that in his dream the watch was stuck at 8:39.
That's because I've been begging you to replace the batteries on the clocks at home.
Ralph laughed nervously. I feel like I've been here before, or that I had a nightmare about this train. Claire looked at him with concern.
Oh, I worry about you sometimes. Maybe drink some water and lay off the beer.
Suddenly, the door of the sleeper room creaked open, and a waiter stepped inside. With a fake smile plastered on his face, he announced,
Hello, I've brought the drinks you ordered. A water and 3 teas. Extra honey, right?